I'm Lisa Stone. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Parenting Aces. Welcome to the Parenting Aces podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Stone. Before we jump into this week's episode, I wanted to just let y'all know that registration is now open for the Saul Schwartz Safe College Tennis All-In tournaments. We're having one in Atlanta, July 21 and 22, and a second one in Baltimore, August 11 and 12. And we'd love to have you join us for these amazing junior/college tournaments. The events are open to any junior and collegiate players, and we do use the UTR platform for the events. So we organize the players according to UTR, and they are guaranteed a minimum of 3 matches. We have amazing prizes again this year, donated by Wilson, by Hollibird Sports, UTR. We have Voss Water back on board. We have Match Tennis app again. Universal Tennis Academy is sponsoring us once again. And I know I'm leaving some out, but I hope you will check out the tournament Facebook page. That is the Sol UTR. THESOL UTR, and all of the information and details are there for registering, sponsoring, or just coming out to watch some great tennis. So hope you'll join us either in Atlanta or Baltimore or both for these great events. Now moving on to this week's episode. Oh my gosh, I had so much fun recording this one. We have this week Coach Todd Widom and tennis parent George Opelka, Riley Opelka's dad. And these two guys had so much amazing wisdom to share with all of you. And I just, like I said, I had such a blast recording this one. So I hope you enjoy hearing their perspectives on everything from choosing a coach to the different developmental pathways to looking at the choice between going to college and turning pro to having sponsors and agents. I mean, it was just an amazing conversation. So sit back and enjoy this week's episode with Coach Todd Widom and tennis parent George Opelka. Good morning, George and Todd. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast this week.
Great to be here.
Thanks.
Good morning.
So, George, I'm going to start with you because your son Riley is having a stellar time on the clay right now. And this all came about because you listened to other podcasts that I've done with Todd and commented on them on Twitter about how Todd just always speaks the truth. So I would love for you to tell our audience, what is it about what Todd is saying about coaching, about the ITF circuit, about college tennis that resonates so deeply with you as the parent of a young professional player?
Sure. I met Todd a long time ago. My son is, 20 now, and I bet you I met Todd 10 plus years ago when he was coaching young players on the USTA events throughout Florida. I bump into him all the time. So we spent a lot of time in Coach's Corner, courtside watching matches, and I learned pretty early in the game in my discussions with Todd that he's a real guy. I mean, that's the one thing I would say that Todd is. He is about as real as they come. And he's not going to sugarcoat anything. And I think a lot of that just stems from his upbringing. He was, and he'll tell you, and he's probably told you, and I've heard it in my discussions and on the podcast. He had a dream as a kid, and he chased his dream. And so he had laser focus from the beginning. He knew what he wanted to do, and he probably made a million mistakes along the way, but like tennis, you learn from your mistakes. So I think that's why everything that Todd says resonates with me, because he lived it, and he still lives it, and he's able to pass that information on to his students. So there's so much history there, so much track record there, so much support he had from home, from his mother. I mean, the stories they just resonate because they make sense. You can't buy this thing, whatever that thing is. If that thing is, I want to play to the best of my ability, I want to play college tennis, I want to play pro tennis, you can't buy it. There's no shortcuts. You got to work. And I think Todd communicates that so well. And, in the last podcast that I heard, the one recurring theme that Todd said, because we were talking about, college tennis or going on the tour, the one recurring theme he said was that every situation, every different player out there is, you have to treat every one of those instances as its own. It's its own decision. There's no one way, and there's no right decision for everybody. Everyone's unique, and you have to look at each one of those players through that set of lenses.
Right. And Todd, I mean, now your head needs to unpuff for a minute.
That was pretty nice, George.
But I would love to hear from you, what makes George such a phenomenal tennis parent?
Well, sure. I mean, obviously, as George said, I met Riley and George, quite some years ago when Riley was a developing junior player, and I had players, that were pretty good players that were playing in the same tournaments as Riley, and I was able to meet George, and so right away, I realized that these are class acts. However good Riley becomes at tennis, this was a class act family, and that's what actually stood out with me. And so that's why we're doing this show before I get on the court and start working, with the kids that I train on a daily basis. In fact, a couple of them are going through some tough fitness now that I went out to take a look at for a couple of minutes. But that was the one thing. Obviously, there's many good things about the Opelka family, but that was really the thing that stood out was these are quality people. And so I would speak to George about tennis or maybe about Riley or maybe about some of the other kids, that I saw at the tournament or kids that I was training. And they were just really nice discussions about tennis. And George was a great athlete in college and I'm sure before college and everything. So it was nice to have these conversations with a former athlete and with a developing junior player. And obviously I went through the process before Riley, but it was nice to have these discussions.
So, George, I'm curious because Riley is doing so well on the Pro Tour. He's part of this next gen group. What are some of the lessons that you as a parent have taken from his journey that are continuing to be applicable now that he's really out of your hands? And you and I have talked about this before in interviews we've done, podcasts we've done, how your role as the parent changes as your child goes through the various steps of this journey. But what are some of the things that you've learned along the way that still stick with you and that you still use?
Well, I'd like to say that I'm still learning, and I've learned a lot along the way, and I've made thousands of mistakes along the way, and that's probably the best way that you can learn. But some of the most valuable lessons that I've learned is, and I still feel this way today, is losing is probably one of the best teaching tools out there. I've had so many fortunate people along the way that I've got to meet and have learned from, people like Todd and told hours and hours of lessons watching matches. And, I'll tell you, one of the things that we usually talk about at a match is it just doesn't matter what happens today. It's great for the kid to win and, and get some points or whatever they do nowadays. but it's just more, development is just so much more important than winning, especially at the early stages. You have to have some wins, just to keep the momentum moving forward, but it's just not the most important. It's important, but not the most important. So I would put that was an extremely valuable lesson for me along the way, and it's not something I always felt strongly that about that. I was in my own admission, I was a crazy tennis parent, at one point in time, and I'd like to think that I'm still a crazy tennis parent, but I'm a good crazy tennis parent. So I would think that's, losing is important, big lesson. Another lesson that I learned along the way is that I think, I don't know if we still do it in the States here, because I'm not as close to junior tennis as I was, say 5 years ago, is I think we over lesson in this country and we underplay. Mm-hmm. And I think we should play more. I always liken tennis to piano, where let's take a lesson a week and then play. I mean, you still have to do drills and do drills every day, but you don't have to take a private lesson every single day to be good. If you've got that sort of cash flow, go for it. But I just don't think that's what you have to do. I think you learn more about competing by playing every day, even if it's a grudge match with somebody 30 years older than your kid. We set up grudge matches all the time. Riley at a very young age played an older gal by the name of Josie Coleman, who's just wrapping up a stellar career at the University of Florida. And we used to drive 45 minutes, 2 days a week. Well, we drive to see them, and the Coolmans would drive young Josie down to our community, and they'd play a match. Or they'd take a lesson once a week with Brian Gottfried and then play a match. So it's another lesson that I think is a good takeaway for people is you learn to do by doing, and I think you learn to play by playing. I think having the right people around you on your team as a coach, like a Todd, is just as critical too. I mean, that's another, extremely valuable lesson is get a coach that's been there or it's been close to the game, whether they played it at a high level or they coached at a high level, but somebody that's going to teach you the right fundamentals earlier in your years. If you've got the right grips early, that's critical. If you've got the right technique on your forehand, on your service motion, getting the right fundamentals in place, is another critical lesson. And I go back to when Riley was probably 7 years old. I met this guy named Tom Gullickson on a golf course, and we kind of hit it off because he was I'm from the Midwest, he's from the Midwest, and one of the things that he asked me, was, hey, do you mind if I take a look at your son's game? I'm like, yeah, go for it. And he said, do you mind if I change anything? Yeah, you can change whatever you want. You had pretty good pedigree. So he changed everything. And I would say that was critical for Riley, and it happened at a very young age. So, just to recap, I'd say, don't be afraid to lose. That's important. Don't over lessen yourself. Get your fundamentals in place early. Those are some of the valuable lessons. Sorry to labor on there, but those are things that were important to Riley.
Yeah, that's great. And Todd, care to comment on what George has said?
He's right on the ball. Even though you're killing my business right now, George, by telling kids not to take too many lessons, but it's 100% the truth. In my opinion, kids are taking way too many lessons. They're not competing enough. They need someone, as well as the kids are going to learn how to construct points better by competing a lot more. As George stated, I grew up as well by playing with a lot of adults, and these were difficult torture matches that my coaches put me through because the adults were a lot more experienced and they understood the court better, and I kept playing adults over and over and over again until basically I went to the University of Miami at 18 years old. I was still hitting with adults working on things, and they were great because these adults were obviously very high level players. So I had great workouts with them. They were mature. My coach was not dealing with attitude issues or kids that didn't want to work that hard. These adults came out to work really hard with the juniors. So I always enjoyed those workouts as well as playing with serious juniors. But in terms of lesson taking and competing, there's so many lessons out there, and everyone has their own little way to do this and that and all this technical stuff. But I think what we've forgotten about in this country is really one of the most important things is that the kids need to compete, but also the coaches need to be coaching and teaching how to compete for these youngsters. And that many times is lost, and I see it over and over again. And so those are the things that I'm working a lot on with the kids that I'm training on a daily basis. I can tell you that in my system, lessons are probably maybe 10% of what I do on a daily basis, and the rest is what we're talking about right now. And this may be a big surprise to people because they have their children taking lessons over and over and over again and trying to learn this technique and swing and grip, and all these things are very important. But learning how to play and understand how to compete, to me, when you get to a certain level and the foundation is set, then lesson taking really isn't that imperative at that point.
George, what are some of the myths, or I don't want to use the word lies because that implies negative intent, and I don't think there's typically negative intent, but I think a lot of times coaches and agents and people around high-level players will tell you what they think you want to hear rather than what you need to hear. And I'm just curious if y'all experienced any of that as Riley was coming up, and how you as a parent sifted through the sugar-coated stuff and got down to the meat of what was important as Riley was developing.
Matt, it's a good question. I think we were blessed in how we were set up, because I had so many strong relationships in the business just from being an involved tennis parent. I wasn't overly involved. I spent thousands of hours on the court with Riley as a young player, and with Riley and Gully. So I learned a ton that way. But I met so many people in the business. I met Bruce Schilling from New Balance when Riley was age. Not because Riley was ready to do a deal with New Balance, just because I met him because I was hanging out with Tom Gullickson, at an early age. I met some of the people from ATP. I met some. Didn't meet too many agents till later in the game, and so I didn't talk to too many agents, to tell you the truth. And I went. I probably went the wrong decision, but I went. I should say wrong decision because we've got the best agent in the business. But I went with gut more than dollars and cents. So most of the decisions we made were just based on instinct. I wasn't exposed to too many myths or like anybody throwing big shiny keys or thousands of dollars at us. It was really more of we weren't really even focused on that part of the business. Like we've always was focused on the tennis and all the other stuff, all the peripherals just weren't important to us. So I haven't been exposed, to tell you the truth, to many of the myths. I mean, I think it's the same advice I give to Riley with tennis or anybody else is, just follow your instincts. And, something I learned at the University of Alabama, one of the last classes I took was, we took this class on, how to become a millionaire. Here are the 10 things you don't want to do. And when you get right out of college. And the number one was don't buy a car, which I think is a brilliant idea. But number two is stay away from the water cooler. So which I still believe in that today. So if there's some noise being talked or something that I believe was just complete BS, I just turn my ear the other way. But there's so many incredibly amazing people in college tennis, pro tennis, junior tennis, whether it's parents, players, coaches. I just haven't been exposed to any of that. I was at the first two rounds of the NCAAs last week in Gainesville and hung out with junior tennis parents that probably some that worked with Todd and their kids and just told old stories. I hate to say it, I haven't been exposed to any of it.
But
I don't hate to say it.
No, that's a good thing. But it does exist, and we've certainly heard stories of players kind of getting wowed with dollar signs and things not ending up so well for them, and I feel like
that's a great point.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's a good point. You spark some things. I haven't heard dollar so much, but I'm sure it happened. And, but you've heard things about Wildcards. That's reality because some of the big agencies own tournaments. So and they do take care of their own. So I don't think that's really a myth per se, and I don't think that's a bad thing. If IMG owns some tournaments and they've invested in some players, then and those players have earned that right for a wild card, give it to them. I don't have a problem with that, especially if people they're not going to give it to somebody that's dogging it. If somebody's putting in the hours and they're a young junior and they're a client, so to speak, give them a wild card and let's see what the guy has or the girl has. So, and I've seen those play out, and so there's no sour grapes for me if XYZ agency owns a tournament and they give one of those players a wild card. It's part of the game, it's part of the business. Everybody needs, you do hear people complaining about, well, he's got a wild card. Well, that's part of the business, and somebody, especially a younger player, they need those kind of things. I'm not saying that you give one. It's not like a vitamin where you give a wild card a day to somebody, but everybody needs those, and my kids got them. I think he got a wild card into Cincinnati a couple of years ago and had an opportunity to play Jeremy Chardet first round, and he beat him, and it's a tight match and could have gone either way, but couldn't have got that without a wild card. So I think that's one of those things that's good for the business, but you hear a lot of negativity about that. At least I've heard that over the years. So I think that's one myth that people should be aware of. With college, I don't know. You hear all kinds of stories about college, and when you talk to the coaches, and I've talked to so many in both, pre, when Riley's being recruited and post, just because I'm such a big fan of the game. I think there's all kinds of myths that go around there, and if a college has success, then they're going to be scrutinized for what they're doing with scholarships and those kind of things. But I think a lot of that's just chatter. Every coach that I spent time with so many of these coaches, and there's so many great people in this business, and they're all above board for the most part. Everybody just wants to win. Everybody wants to recruit the best players or good kids. So again, I haven't been exposed to any of it. Nobody made any false promises to us. We were made, people they offered Riley some nice things, but nothing material. It was more or less, we're going to make sure, we're going to guarantee your kid's success. We're going to make sure he's set up to succeed, whether it's on the court, whether it's with, the right people to take care of his body, or whether it's people to help make sure that he's going to class and he's studying. Those are the kind of promises that we were made. And I spent a lot of time with people like Brian Shelton and Peter Smith and Manny Diaz, and all those guys were just straight shooters from the get-go with us.
That's great to hear. Todd, you've got a young player who is going to have a big decision to make probably in the next year, right? Ronnie is going to have to make a decision about college or pro. And Riley is really, of the next gen players, he's the one I think that came closest to going the college route of the ones that I've talked to. Is that a true statement, George?
Yeah, it was a tough decision for us.
Yeah, I mean, y'all were pretty close. So Todd, do you have questions for George as it pertains to Ronnie and kind of his decision that he's going to be faced with?
Well, I don't know if I have questions for George, but, you know, I mean, I was one of those players as well. I'm not sure when Riley started to play some low-level professional events, but I think we spoke about on other shows that I started getting my feet wet in pro tennis when I was 16 years old and started to play men and you know, guys that were in college, guys that got out of college to become professionals, or guys that became professionals right out of junior tennis. You know, I think a lot of things have to be in place for it to become a reality for a junior player to become a full-time professional like what Riley is doing right now. And what you're hearing from George is that, you know, these are very educated individuals. They listen to the right voices, people that had a lot of experience and know what it takes to become a high-level professional tennis player. There's no guesswork. They were 100% sure and certain with their decision for Riley to become a professional player. I'm sure, you know, at 18 years old, I'm guessing he turned professional. So what if we're speaking about Ronnie Holman, who I actually brought, I think, about a month or two ago to train with Riley for him to get some great experience. So, you know, we thank Riley for that great workout for Ronnie. And but basically, there's things that have to be in place for it to become a reality. Whether it could be financial, it could be technical, it could be mental, it could be physical. There's a lot of things that have to be in place so that you're making the correct decision, and that the young player is making the correct decision to maybe forego college or have college become a training ground for that player to become professional out of college. So what I'm doing, if you're wondering, with a 16-year-old who's getting his feet wet now in professional tennis and playing high-level events, is that I'm trying to give him an education on a daily basis of what it's going to take for him to become a professional tennis player. Now, whether he wants to become one at 18 years old, at 20 years old, 22 years old, 19 years old, that's going to be his decision. But I'm showing him on a daily basis what the reality is and what it's actually going to take for him to have a great career in professional tennis. Now, the rest is really up to him. And if he has to make a decision at 18 years old, that's great, because it's maybe a reality for him that he could turn professional at 18 years old, or he's not ready, but there's some really good options for him. And that's really what I'm doing. But in terms of the workouts and the discipline every single day that he's going through, these are very difficult days, but he's going to now get about a year to a year and a half of professional tennis events so that he can really make an educated decision about his future.
That's fantastic. I mean, I don't think a lot of juniors get that, really, either because the coach doesn't have the knowledge to take them through that process, or the family doesn't have the resources to make that happen. So, I mean, what a gift for Ronnie and his family. And George, what a gift for Riley that you guys had the wherewithal to ask the questions, to surround yourselves with the right people that were being straight shooters with you. Because again, I do hear stories of families that are getting sunshine blown up their rear ends about their kids' talent level, what their potential is, what the future can look like. And I think, there are sad stories of families getting sucked into that. And maybe the kid either doesn't have the talent, doesn't have the drive, doesn't have the work ethic, or just simply doesn't have the desire to put the work in to get there.
I think both you guys are so spot on, and that's why I said in my tweet, call Todd. You're not going to get a bunch of garbage just thrown in your face. You're going to get the truth, and the tour is so brutal. People don't realize how tough it is out there, and you can't. There's no shortcuts there. You got to put the work in every single day. My kid probably stretches twice a day, maybe 3 times a day, and doing the fitness. That the things that are just, they're pain, But this is your job now, and I think that decision for us was a difficult decision, and we had so many great voices to help us make the decision. And I think, like Todd said, the situation has to be perfect for you. It may be, it definitely has to be financial. Even if you got the money, it's still a financial decision because it takes a ton of money. You have to be mature. You have to be talented. You have to be lucky. A lot of things have to happen, and then you can make every right decision and still not make it on the tour. So I think having the right guidance, which we did, I called up something that Todd and Riley have in common. People may not know this, and I think I'm correct in saying this, Todd, so you can correct me based on our courtside chats, is they had the same coach at one point in their career. So I believe Todd played for Jay Berger at Miami. I think that's correct. Right?
In fact, I did. But not only did I play for Jay was hitting in my lessons when I was about 7 years old. So the coaches that I was working with, the 2 Argentine coaches, and one actually helps me on a daily basis. Unfortunately, the other one, George Paris, passed away when I was 15 years old, and they were partners. So I had a relationship with Jay Berger from when I was 7 years old. And so he was top 10 in the world, and he was already hitting in my lessons. And so I was already part of this unbelievable training environment and watching these amazing players train on a daily basis, not only with Jay, but also with all these other phenomenal players, whether they were amateurs or professional players. So I was already thrown in that arena from a very young age. And so when I was coming through, I had the relationship with Jay, and then I went right on to the University of Miami. So George knows that, and Jay was my coach at the University of Miami, and so that was a guy that knew what it took to become a high-level professional player. And so I was very fortunate to be around that type of individual from a very young age.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jay probably over the years is just because the USTA is always under a magnifying glass. It's in the spotlight, so he gets scrutinized for the way he combs his hair. But I'll tell you this: 'cause I met Jay Berger when I think Riley met Jay Berger when he was 8 or 9 in Cincinnati when we went to a tournament. And the story you'll hear on Jay Berger is he's like Todd. He's one of the hardest working guys in tennis. Blue collar, lunch bucket, construction cap kind of guy. Works his tail off every day. And it's when we went through the college decision making process with Jay, because I've known him so long, I trust him, and he was he's in charge of men's development for the USGA at the time. We were constantly getting bombarded with letters and things from college coaches and a few agents, and Jay told Riley he has a great knack for just keeping things simple. He said, "Don't think about turning pro. Don't think about college tennis. Just think about getting better every day." And this is pretty early in the game, maybe Riley's junior year, early in his junior year. And that resonated with me. So it's like, we don't have to make a decision right now. Just get better every day. And then the decision will take care of itself. And it did. I mean, we had, Riley had some success along the way. And for us, I felt like we got the proper feedback from his team, people like Berger and Gullickson and, of course, Lynn and I, and Riley. It just made sense for us. The finances were taken care of. We think that he was making the right, progressing as a tennis player. Maturity factors, that's one of those, that's an X factor. It takes time. growing into your body takes time. So, but for us, it just made sense, and we talked to the right people. And Berger was one of those key guys. And Riley's worked with him off and on, because he was running the USTA at the time, the men's development. But back in November, Riley transitioned his coaching, duties over to Jay. So I've just been fortunate to spend a lot of time on court with him.
That's fantastic. One of the things as you guys are talking that occurs to me is Riley has been part of this group of young Americans that is doing really well. And one of the things Todd has talked about numerous times on the podcast is the fact that he chooses the players that he works with very carefully to ensure that the group dynamic is positive and supportive and all that. I would love to hear both of you talk about the impact of the group on individual development. And George, maybe we can start with you and Riley coming up with such an amazing group of kids.
Yeah, I think, the one thing that lasts through all this tennis craziness is friendships, and it's critical, I think, to have a group of good kids, that push each other. And it started before you had Fritz, Paul, Opelka, that whole group of players, and even some of those guys like we grew up with Rybakov, from TCU, some of these Florida kids. Spent a lot of time just running around between matches at tournaments, chasing each other around. But I think Roddick put it best recently. I heard him on a interview. He talks about healthy jealousy, and I think we have a lot of that where you see a TFO have success, or you'll see a Fritz have success, and then you'll see, Riley might have a great match against either one of those guys, so they start believing. So there is this healthy jealousy amongst that whole group, but and there's a tremendous amount of respect amongst those guys for one another. I mean, they all want to see each other succeed, except for when they play each other, and they believe, and they believe they can beat each other, But it started young. I remember spending, mornings in the hotel lobbies with in Arizona, Winter Nats with a TFO and a Riley and a Paul and a Rybakov, So I think it's critical, to have people pushing each other and, but also to have friends, even more importantly, people that you can get along with and people that'll pick each other up when you're down and stuff. And, again, I did reflect back on some of my discussions with, some of our mentors along the way. And maybe 3-4 years ago, Tim Mayotte pulled me aside at one of these Super Nats or national tournaments, and he said, as you guys go down this professional tour path, the most important thing for me on the tour was I had 2 or 3 friends to hang out with when I was on the road, just so I had somebody to hang with, and because it can be extremely lonely. So you see that, Fritz and Paul are, Fritz, Paul, Riley, Kozlov. I know Riley's in France right now, and he spent a lot of time with Kozlov last week, and he ended up playing him. So I think it's critical to have some peers who are going to push you. And I think Todd probably has that culture set up, knowing Todd, down at his in his business.
Todd, that's your cue.
All right. So here we go. So as many of you know, I started with one kid to train who was a senior in high school in 2010. And so it was always my goal. My number one goal was to have the best system to train tennis players in South Florida. Not masses of kids, but to have the best quality system and the best people around these certain individuals. Now, over these 8 years, obviously, you may get some bad apples, and I'm always monitoring that and everything. And now I'm very, very fortunate that I'm now kind of picking and choosing who I would love to have around me 5-6 hours a day. And so to me, that's exciting. To me, it's not exciting to have masses and masses of kids with different mentalities. I put the kids through an assessment. If a parent contacts me, I put them through an assessment with the parent there, and we go over what I see and see if it'll be a good fit for myself and for them and for the system that I currently run. And so what George is speaking about is a healthy environment with the same mentalities. And so that's what I've tried to create in my system. And so that's been really exciting for me because I've never had more people contacting me about what is going on. And so obviously as a business owner, that's exciting. But in terms of development, I believe that's what you need. You're a product of your society, and I continue to say this to the kids that I train on a daily basis. Now, if you don't have that and you have kids of all different mentalities and work ethic and attitudes, that can really hurt the individuals. So those are the things that I'm continually monitoring, and that's what makes it exciting for me to get on the court every day is that mentality that is a positive one, and kids that want to learn and work hard, regardless of their current level or ability. That's what excites me to get on the court, and I'm blessed that I can pick and choose now who I want to be spending my whole day with.
Can you either one of you give some specific examples of things you've seen where the group dynamic has really worked to push things forward? And then also where maybe there's been, like you said, Todd, a bad apple that has really interfered with the ability to move forward?
Well, I mean, I'll take a stab at it. So we didn't have the group thing growing up. I mean, we did, but not really. I mean, because we grew up somewhat in a rural area of Florida, and I think that happens all over the country. You know, Jack Sock grew up in Nebraska. You know, I don't think he had 50 people in an academy that he was training with, or he had that at least didn't have that luxury, and that probably happens all over the country. So you have to get creative as a parent if you believe in, you know, groups pushing each other. So we didn't have too much of that. So we drove a little bit further, but, you know, Riley would just get in groups with people that were a little older than him, or we would play again. We'd get in groups with some, didn't matter if they were boys or girls, you know, just people that were older than him that would push him. And so that was kind of our experience. And eventually we had to, Riley had to move out of the area just to, if he really wanted to chase his dream, to be more in a group setting. And I think USTA has been, again, I can't give those guys enough credit. Everybody over there, they've been tasked with, or at least that's part of their charter, into, you know, developing men and women that'll be playing in the second week of Grand Slams. You know, that's a pretty strong charter, but they've put together over the years, and they've morphed over the years too, to their credit. Same kind of culture that Todd has you know, captured in his business. It's so difficult to do and to have success at it. You know, you can have all the best players in the world, and they're the best players in your state, the best players in your region, but you could have one bad apple that's going to spoil the bunch. And I think that's when then someone like a Todd or the business owner or who's ever in charge of that group can just need to intervene, or a parent needs to intervene. And I think it's no different than a college team that has a guy that, you know, falls out of line. You need to have somebody step in and slap him, you know. So we didn't have too much of that because the system took care of it for us. You know, USTA, who was ever running the group there was always somebody that maybe, you know, cross the road when they weren't supposed to cross the road, because there's certain rules you have to abide by when you're part of the system. And if you don't, then if you break the rules, you get kicked out or you get slapped. So, and I saw that happen at USDA, where they didn't put up with garbage. So either people had to straighten up or move on, and it happened. So I think just don't. You can't let the tail wag the dog. I think that's the most important thing. But again, groups for us, we had to move to groups because we were rural. We had to drive an hour instead of driving 10 minutes. Where Todd's at, there's so many great players down there, but there's also a lot more options for kids to go to. So kids tend to migrate around to where the best players are until they find a system. Like Todd's got a great system down there. So he's at the point where he can, people will find him. He doesn't have to go find them. So I don't know if that provides you with any insight. That was kind of our experience.
Got it. And Todd, what about for you? I mean, can you give an example of where you've seen the group really, even raise maybe the least talented player in the group? How the group dynamic has buoyed someone to reach a higher level?
Well, I'm seeing that on a daily basis in my system. Obviously, my partner and I, Pierre Arnold, who trained me for 20 years, we're doing that on a daily basis. We're mentoring these kids about what it's going to take for them to achieve their goals and dreams, and it's a highly competitive environment. This is not a bunch of lesson taking. It's not a bunch of giggling and goofing around. These kids are here for a specific reason, and these are the select kids that we want to be with. Could be 4 to 6 hours a day. So if you can create, which has been my goal and dream, if you can create this environment that's healthy and competing and kids smiling and understanding that if they do things properly, that we will praise them, but if they don't, they're going to face the consequences. To me, that's life. We're not walking around the court and mentoring kids and telling them how great they're doing when they're not doing great. I don't understand that, even though it's great to make money and everything, but that's just not who Pierre and I are. And I think people understand that, maybe with the social media or the articles I'm writing or even the radio shows that I've done with you, Lisa, is that's what excites me to get on the court every day, or else I wouldn't get on the court every day, or I would work less hours. But being still, I would hope people think at 35 years old, I'm still a pretty young guy, that I can put in the hours, and I enjoy doing that with the right mentality and the right kids. And so that's what I'm doing on a daily basis. And so I'm seeing these kids push each other every single day, and they're highly competitive. Even in the simplest of drills, this is a highly competitive environment. It's not only for their tennis, but also for the life skills that they're going to be learning on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've been reading since my kids started playing about these groups that come up together and push each other. And it seems like this group of 19, 20, 21-year-olds that we've got right now in the U.S. is a perfect example of that. And hopefully the next wave is coming up, and maybe, Todd, it's coming up through your academy, your system of, this group that you've put together. But I think, you read that, and if you, like you said, George, if you live outside of one of the hotbeds, it's difficult to create that type of environment for your child unless you have the ability and flexibility to drive distance and, get your kid into that kind of setting. I mean, I think it's amazing what you and Lynn have done with Riley, and you have another child who doesn't play tennis.
We do. And she was a great, well, she played early, but she was a great supporter and still is today, She gets up and watches live stream at 5 a.m, and roots for her brother. So, but it takes, everybody has to, I don't want to say make sacrifices, because you don't, but everybody contributes, because it's not a sacrifice. It's just like Todd says, it's just life, and it's what you do. And, Riley didn't go to prom, but he's been to Shenzhen. So, I mean, there's different, you know what I mean? there's give and take, and I think there's so much more to life than just, it's not all, again, I'm not gonna sell against an education ever. But it's not for everybody, or it's not for everybody at 17. My kid may go to college, he may not, and because I'm not going to knock the guy or gal that's a plumber or an electrician because they learned a trade. It just isn't for everybody. So I think it's easy to say that, because our decisions get challenged and questioned, but that's okay. I think it is what it is, and I don't. I know Riley doesn't regret his decision to not to avoid college, or to at least at this point in his career. So I think, as Todd said last week a couple weeks ago on that podcast, everybody's situation is different, and you have to treat it that way. And I think that if you're somewhere rural, then you think you've got a kid that can play at the next level, whether that's college or beyond that, then you'll figure it out. And you may even jump on an airplane to go see a system like, or drag a coach along to go see a system like Todd has built, just so you can take that template and bring it back home. That's maybe a little bit crazy, but that's what crazy tennis parents do. You figure it out.
That is true.
It's funny that George just brought that up. I've had a couple of coaches ask me, "Can and check out what you're doing on a daily basis?" And I said, "Sure, that's not a problem." But as we're speaking about these small groups, and George had to travel around for Riley's tennis development and everything, I just started thinking about, really, when I was a developing junior player, going to tournaments, and I didn't grow up in a big system. It was a small little system. I had maybe only a couple of kids that could push me, and I could push them, and it was a healthy, small little environment. But I remember thinking, going off to tournaments, that if I did not really do things properly in my training, it was going to show in my tournaments, and it did. And so those were the concerns or stresses or whatever you want to call it that I had on a daily basis, knowing that I was hopefully not going to a tournament to be unprepared. And I'm speaking about when I would go to tournaments and Andy Roddick was there and Robbie Ginepri was there and players like that obviously got to the upper echelons of professional tennis, that regardless of whether you're with an academy of masses of kids or you were in a very small system, maybe like Riley and I were in, is that on a daily basis, you have to be putting in a lot of great work, and it's going to show in your tournaments. That's just the reality. And that's what it's about, regardless of the system that you're in. And those results they're going to tell a lot. And, it just depends on what each individual is looking for.
Right. Well, guys, we're down. Go ahead.
And they may even show up. They may even show up in a loss. You can. I'll forget. Mike Sell told me years ago, though, there's no such thing as a good loss. And I agree with him and I disagree with him, but because I think that you can still play a great match. You're never going to play your best tennis, for 2 or 3 sets of tennis, but you can still go out and compete your tail off and lose, and that's just the way it is. I still think there's good and bad, and you can take, there's both positive and negatives you can take away from a match, but losing doesn't mean failing, and I think that's an important takeaway. And although the kids are going to hang their heads sometimes, especially more in the juniors, but I think the one thing that, like the Todd just said, and I think Riley is really starting to learn, and he's got a ways to go, that if I brought it today and I competed my tail off and I lost, that's okay. I left it all on the court. And I think you have to do that every day in practice, and it'll carry over into your matches, and then your results will speak for themselves.
Well, to me, that's one of the things that makes Rafael Nadal such an amazing role model for kids, because he'll go into press after a loss and, maybe it's considered an upset or whatever. And I mean, he tells the people in the room, the media, look, it's just a tennis match. The world didn't end because I lost today. It's just not a big deal. I've got another one tomorrow. And that attitude, I think, really has contributed to his longevity in the game.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, as we're going through this discussion, and I'm now thinking that I remember coming off the court in my professional career or my amateur career thinking that, man, I played a great match. I'm very proud of my performance. And unfortunately, maybe a point here and a point there didn't go my way. Maybe the other person came up with a great shot. Maybe I missed a shot by inches. That's the sport. It is what it is. But as I tell the parents all the time and the kids, regardless of whether it's a practice or a tournament, you need to feel proud of what you did that day. And if you don't, then there's something wrong. You need to feel proud of what you're accomplishing day after day. And just like George stated and Jay Berger stated very clearly to me many years ago, is that you need to be getting better each and every day. And I tell the players that in my system as well. Don't get off this court until you feel like you accomplished something in that drill, whether you're happy or not, or you're performing your best that day. You need to feel when you get off the court that I accomplished something every single day. And that's the most important. Then you can build an athlete.
You know, the one Jay Berger quote that I heard, I don't know if he ever said it, but Jay's never wanted just to make stuff up. But the one Jay Berger's quote I heard was, as a young kid, he used to ask himself when he hit the pillow every night, did anybody in the world work harder than me today? That's pretty strong right there.
It sure is. Wow. Yeah, that's a big one.
Well, you know, I mean, Jay was an unbelievable American player. I'm an American as well, but we were brought up by Argentines, and so that blue collar mentality was instilled in us at a very, very young age, and so that's where that actually comes from, is that we were not allowed to leave the facility or finish our training unless we actually felt like there's no one in the country or on the planet that's working harder than us. That was instilled from our unbelievable Argentine coaches.
I love that. Well, guys, we're coming to the end of our hour together. I just want to make sure I give you each a chance to get everything in that you wanted to get in. So, Todd, I'll start with you. Is there anything left that you would like to tell our audience today?
Yeah, no, I mean, just, I hope the audience that's listening, maybe they don't know the Opelkas, George and Riley, but I've gotten to know them over the last bunch of years, and these are individuals that are amazing people. They're class acts, and these are the ones that you want to be listening to, and you want them to do well. And I saw it again when I took Ronnie to train with Riley a couple months ago, because I hadn't seen Riley for a while. And as we were going through their practice, I was just thinking, man, what just really good human beings they are. And these are the ones that you want to pull for. And I really hope Riley does well. And I know he just won a challenger in Europe on the red clay, which is very difficult to do. And so it looks like his career is headed on the right track and on the right path. And so I think it's a very exciting time for the Opelkas, which is great to see.
George?
Well, thanks. I don't know what to say other than that. My career took me to Florida from the Midwest, and I'm so glad that happened because I think tennis teaches so many life lessons. It's just, you meet so many great people. It's a great game. If you're an aspiring, tennis player, do you want to play in college tennis? You want to play on the tour? You've got crazy tennis parents. I would say, don't get caught up in wins. Just caught up in development, and take your kids to a college tennis match. I think it's one of the most exciting and best products we have out there today, and it's a great opportunity for you to get your kids an education if that's the chance you want to pursue. And if you're passing through Florida, look up Todd. You're going to have a great time, and you're going to learn a ton, and it's going to be just straight talk and no BS. But you'll learn a ton about tennis.
I love it.
Great to be here. Great to be here today.
Well, thank you, George Opelka and Todd Widom, for sharing your wisdom. And I'm so glad we got to do this. This was a fun opportunity for me. And, you know, my tennis worlds collide more often than not these days. And this is just one more example of that happening. George, you and I met at my very first U.S. Open. So, yeah, we've known each other a while, and I just have the utmost respect for you and Lynn and how you've raised your family. And I'm so happy to see Riley's career moving up, and you know, that it really seems like the decision to turn pro at a young age as he did is paying off for him. And I just couldn't be more thrilled for all of the Opelkas. So congratulations to y'all. Todd, keep rocking it, man. I mean, keep doing what you're doing. My audience that has reached out to you have all reported back with very positive things to say. So I just wish you all the best and continued success there. And both you guys, thanks so much for doing the podcast with us.
Thank you.
Thank you much, Lisa, and thank you very much, George, for coming on the show. That was a fun hour for me.
Me too.
And to the Parenting Aces listeners, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on Parenting Aces. I'm Lisa Stone, and you've been listening to the Parenting Aces podcast. For tennis parents, by a tennis parent. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe to us and write a review on iTunes. For more information on navigating the junior and college tennis journey, please visit us online at parentingaces.com. Thanks for tuning in and sharing us with your tennis community.